Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build UFL edition. Actually, let me share my screen here. I'm just showing my face. That's fine too. But let's see, where did I put it? Okay, all right, here we go. Roto Grinders has UFL projections finally live. Took them all the way until Friday, but hey, hats off to them for getting them up. I'm going to break down this slate real quick and just show you where my head is at. Lots to like, and it's mostly at the highest level, but hopefully I can point you in the right direction. If I do, you can go ahead and give this video a like. That helps me out a lot. Also, subscribe to the channel. That also helps us and lets us know that we're doing something right for the community out there. It helps the community grow. Also alerts you to future videos. All right, so let's get right into it. Just breaking down position by position here. Last week handed out a few good plays, helped you get away from some expensive studs that did not pan out. And of course, the guy that I was telling you was bad chalk, Quentin Dorbity, went off with 26 fantasy points. He hadn't topped 14 fantasy points all year. That was ridiculous. No, it doesn't make any sense. Anyways, so quarterback is a little bit tricky this week. AJ McCarron is back, but he's not. So it looks like he's active, but he's not technically starting. So that means Manny Wilkins is in play. Manny Wilkins had 12 attempts for 79 rushing yards last week. He did not score a touchdown, yet he still had 14 fantasy points thanks to that nice rushing floor built in for him. So that is still there, and he's coming in as the third best projecting quarterback, and he's facing Arlington, a team that AJ McCarron put up 20 fantasy points against back in week 2. So in theory, assuming AJ McCarron doesn't come in and take over if Wilkins struggles or something, Wilkins should be a pretty decent play at 9K. Not super into him just because the actual passing upside is a bit of an unknown, and the fact that AJ McCarron is kind of nearing his return, that just puts him on shaky ground. So I'm not super interested in it. I'd keep him in my player pool just because he has a nice projection and the matchup looks okay. And also that rushing floor, 12 carries, that's nice. So I would imagine, assuming he doesn't get benched or something out of nowhere, Wilkins is a decent bet for 50-plus rushing yards. He's a decent bet to actually score this week and probably score on the ground. So in a vacuum at 9K, Manny Wilkins looks really good. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Obviously, the top play remains Adrian Martinez. He is facing the best defense against quarterbacks, so that's a little bit concerning, especially when he comes in at 11.5K. Even so, he's the chalkiest option for a reason. He has elite rushing floor. The guy has been just a menace on the ground. Let's see, where was he at? He's literally had 28 plus fantasy points in each of the last 4 games. He's been a bit of a revelation for the UFL. 2 rushing touchdowns last week. He had 138 yards rushing 4 weeks ago against Houston. So just the upside across the board is amazing. He's not just a runner, though. He has 3+ passing scores in each of his last 3 games as well. So crazy upside. So I think while the price is egregious and the matchup stinks, it's really hard for me to get away from Adrian Martinez. And also just in general, there's not that many studs I feel like I have to go pay for. So to start my build with Adrian Martinez as kind of a lock or just be really, really overweight, I think that makes a lot of sense on this slate. Really, nobody else stands out that much. The only other guy that I want to talk about would be Jordan Ta'amu, just because he has rushing upside and he is facing the worst defenses against quarterbacks on the week. He did bounce back with 19 fantasy points last week, even though he had top 10 plus fantasy points in either of the last 3 games. So he's certainly tough to trust, but the price at 9.3K is pretty decent. Kind of a nice leverage play off of guys like Case Cookus and Manny Wilkins and Dorbity. So he's right in that same price range, but he's got the second best projection due to that matchup in the rushing floor. And right now he's only 8% owned. So he's way less owned, at least projected, than Wilkins, Cookus, and Dorbity. And he projects better. So assuming that ownership doesn't tilt from where it is right now, he looks like a really good tournament play to me. So right now my quarterback pool is probably going to be Adrian Martinez up top just because that crazy ceiling, then Ta'amu, and then Manny Wilkins. I think you can obviously make an argument for Luis Perez just because he bounced back, had a big game last week. And then Dormady, is he going to just keep it going after 26 fantasy points last week? If you believe in it, you can go for it. Him or Perez are viable. A lot of these other guys, though, are splitting work. And then, of course, I'm a little bit worried about Wilkins just because AJ McCarron is back. He's just behind him this week, supposedly. All right, moving on to running back. Lots to like at running back, but a couple things we should definitely note. The first thing to note would be injury statuses. John Lovett, who I liked a lot last week, he is now injured. He's out. So that's going to be, you're just not going to use him, obviously. But who we will want to use is Anthony McFarland, who's probably going to look like the best overall play at running back. His ownership is not possibly accurate right now. 0.01%. Nah, that's not true. Which now makes me wonder if the 8% ownership on Tamu is accurate too. But either way, he comes in with the second best projection, and with no Lovett there, he's obviously going to look really, really good at 8.9K. Definitely a good play if you want to get away from Jacob Saylors, which I kind of do, since he's 9.8K, and he's going to be probably sharing the rock even more so with Wayne Gallman, who was kind of eating into his production last week. And when I say kind of, I mean a lot. Wayne Gallman had 9 carries for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns, and just was the way better fantasy producer there. So if that is going to keep up even a little bit, I don't want to pay almost 10K for Jacob Saylors. Now, with Manny Wilkins still back there, obviously they're going to probably run a lot more than they would if AJ McCarron were healthy and playing. So Saylors is still in play. He's got the third best projection. He's carrying ownership for a reason. But for all the reasons I said, I think I'm out on him this week, especially if he's going to be 32% owned or higher. So McFarland is my favorite play at running back at 8.9K. I'm just going to click him in. He's got the second best projection. And I don't really care about ownership. With Lovett out, he's just going to get all the touches. And he was a beast last week with 31 fantasy points. In fact, he's been a really efficient player in general, just as far as like getting touchdowns and racking up touches and yardage. 118 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns last week. And in 3 of 4 games on the season, he has 14 plus fantasy points. So lots to like about him. Anthony McFarland looks like a really, really good play. Another guy that looks really good is going to be Matthew Colburn. We got 2 injuries to the Michigan backfield, and that's helped Colburn walk into a really, really nice role. 15 plus carries in 3 of the last 4 games, 24 carries last week. That's helped him get 18 plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. So he looks like he has a really, really solid role at the moment, and he faces a Houston defense that ranks just 5th against running back. So I have no issues with him at 8K flat. He is coming in as the guy with the best projection, and he's going to be owned, but he's just a really good points per dollar play when you look at his role, production, and price. So him and McFarland, I feel like, are borderline locks for me on this slate. They look really, really good. Worth noting Darius Hagens, just because he's cheap, 5.8K. He's listed as the starter for DC. He had 9 touches last week. He's facing the league's worst run defense. The role is not amazing, and the production has not been there, but the matchup and price look good. So I think he's viable as a value play. Coming in with a 10-point fantasy projection, that's okay. And he's not like super chalky or anything. So like as a value play at 5.8, I think you can do a lot worse for sure. More value to be had with Darius Victor. He projects a little bit better. He is a lot more expensive at 7.2K. But he's had 11 plus carries in 3 straight and 5 of his last 7. He's had 14 plus touches in 5 games on the year. And he's got a good matchup against the 7th ranked defense against running backs. So reasonable price, okay projection. He's going to carry a lot more ownership than somebody like Hagens, but I think he's a lot safer of a play as well. Not really seeing Devian Smith, I guess. He has decent projection at 7.6. You can certainly entertain him too, but I don't want to get too running back crazy here. I just think for me, Colburn and McFarland, chalk be damned, they just look like really, really good plays. I like them a lot. Wide receiver and tight end. Let's see. It should surprise nobody that Hakeem Butler leads the way with the top projection of the slate. He's also going to carry ownership, 22%, probably going to be higher than that. He's going to be the highest owned wide receiver. Here's the bummer. He doesn't have AJ McCarron still. Manny Wilkins did not turn him back into a stud last week. It wasn't great. Let's see what he had. He had 7 fantasy points, 3 catches on 6 targets, no touchdowns. So, it's just going to be a lower ceiling. Obviously, Butler is a bit of a freak, a nice tight end wide receiver hybrid. Major red zone presence. He's been a beast on the year, averaging 17 fantasy points per game, which leads the UFL. And he also has a nice matchup with with Arlington ranking 6th against wide receivers. So if you want to go pay for Butler Hakeem Butler, I have no problem with that. He does have the best projection. He certainly has the best ceiling of any wide receiver option on this slate. The only problem is he doesn't have McCarron there. So we can definitely just assume, if we want to, that he's going to be bad chalk. He's way too expensive for his current situation and just move along. Because I'm investing in Adrian Martinez and those two running backs that I really, really like, I'm more than okay with going away from Hakeem Butler. The second Adrian McCarron comes back, I'm all in on Hakeem Butler because he's a beast with him there. But honestly, I don't really want much of this offense for the passing game unless I'm playing Manny Wilkins. If I'm playing Manny Wilkins, I'll gladly complete the stack and hope that Hakeem Butler pays off that price tag. But he's just a little bit too expensive for me at the moment. Jontre Kirkland is kind of in the same boat as far as being really expensive and not really getting it done. The targets are there, 8+ targets in 4 of the last 5 games. I mean, the guy can be a PPR demon, but he doesn't score touchdowns really. He hasn't scored since week 2. And he's had more than 11 fantasy points 0 times in the last 4 outings. So unless he's really actually hauling in all these targets and finding a way to get in the end zone, I think he's also a really expensive guy that I'm not super excited to be playing. That said, I think based off of target volume and ownership coming at 10% right now, half of what Butler is, I think he's the better tournament play over Butler for sure. Let's see, other wide receivers that stand out. For Arlington, J.P. Payton, where's he ranking here? Projection doesn't come in that well, but he does average 12 fantasy points per game on the year. He has had 24 plus in 2 of his last 4, and he had 15 fantasy points last time he faced St. Louis. So I think for Arlington, if you're looking for a wide receiver, he is the play to go. I do prefer teammate Sal Cannella, who is their tight end. His projection is slightly better, but he is also cheaper. He's been awesome. So if I'm going to play, one of the guys, he's probably going to be the guy I do. 23 fantasy points last week, 30 fantasy points the week before, 8+ targets in 4 straight games, and a touchdown in each of the last 3 games. So his role has been awesome. And worth noting that St. Louis ranks 7th out of 8 against tight ends. So if you're looking for an Arlington guy, it's Cannella for me for sure. Moving over to Birmingham, we have Deion Kane, one of the better projections of the slate, 8.3K. That's okay, 11.29 projection. He scored in the last 2 games, 6+ targets in 4 straight games. He is pretty involved. If he can keep scoring, I think he's going to smash that price tag. A little bit more expensive than I'd really like for Birmingham, especially since the matchup is not really good. But I do really like Adrian Martinez, so I do want to pair somebody with him. And the first guy I would be Deion Kane. You can also look at Marlon Williams, 3 touchdowns his last 3 games, and Jay Sternberger, who was a pretty good red zone guy last year. But honestly, the guy I really like for Birmingham to pair with Adrian Martinez is going to be Kevin Austin Jr. He had an 80-yard game or 80-yard play 3 games ago, 2 touchdowns over his last 3 weeks. The volume isn't crazy, but the upside is. So I like, let's actually see where he is as far as his price. 5.1K. So I like the price, like the upside, like the stacking with Adrian Martinez. I don't want to go crazy with stacking on Adrian Martinez because he kind of spreads the ball around, and obviously he could do a lot of his damage with himself with his legs. But Austin is a really interesting way to, maximize the value with Adrian Martinez as a stack. All right, last guy I'll talk about on Houston. Kiki Chisholm, 10 targets last week, 15 fantasy points, really good matchup, and he's only a 6.2K. I used him the week prior, and he wasn't nearly as good, and that was really disappointing. What did he do? Yeah, 3.9 fantasy points a week. I used him the very next week, 7 catches on 10 targets, 80 yards, 15 fantasy points. So when you look at the role and the matchup and the price, I think he's a pretty good play. Where is he coming in here for projection? Not really great, so he's probably going to get overlooked. He's coming at 20% ownership because of the reasons I mentioned. A little surprised the projection isn't a little bit better. But yeah, he looks a lot better than the projections are making it look. Nobody else really stands out. I will note Pearson, Ja'Cory Pearson, because of who he's been in the past. Previously, he had been a PPR beast. He had 10 targets back in week 4. His role has been pretty inconsistent since then. So he's certainly tough to trust. But if you're not going to trust in Hakeem Butler, you could pivot over to his teammate in Pearson. Defenses, it's a bit of a crapshoot. I'm not necessarily I'm not necessarily feeling really good about one individual defense, but if I was going to play a defense and feel good about it, mostly for me, it's going to be like, oh, let me go get the guys I really, really want, and then let's see where I'm at with defense. Like, am I going to go get away from a player I love just so I can go get a defense I might like? No, that's not really how I operate. It's not what I want to do. But I would try to leverage it a little bit if possible, if it makes sense and it kind of fits in. Like, for instance, if I'm not going to play a chalky option like Quentin Dormady, and I think he's going to fall back, maybe I go play defense against Quentin Dormady to look at Birmingham, and here they are. Let's see, where's Birmingham? The Stallions are the second highest projected defense and the chalkiest defense. So, like I said, that makes sense. If you want to leverage that chalkiness of Adrian Martinez, go play San Antonio. You can certainly do that. I don't think that's really a good idea, but you could do that. I would be more likely to go against Manny Wilkins maybe, or go against one of these teams. There's a couple of them that are actually doing 2 quarterback systems, and go play against teams that clearly do not have it figured out offensively right now. As far as projections go, obviously the Panthers project the best and the Stallions project the best at a much cheaper price. So I certainly would be looking at the Stallions right now. And then I think DC also looks pretty good. I don't really want to invest $5K salary in my defense. I think I'd be kind of looking at that 4.4, 4.6 range. All right, that is going to do it for me. Hopefully I've given you a good idea of where my head's at for a lot of these plays. I think it's kind of a clear-cut slate. Obviously, there's going to be these one-off guys who just go nuts and you can't predict them, and that's just the fun of using a lineup optimizer and rolling out a ton of lineups if you want to play that way. I'm just going to do a single entry. My current approach is to just eat that Adrian Martinez chalk, and hopefully he can overcome that matchup, go get those 2 stud running backs, and then fill up my roster the best way I can after that. Not really that worried about my defense, although I will try to prioritize the Stallions if I can, and I'll gladly go eat some wide receiver value, depending on what's left over. But my core is going to be, for sure, Adrian Martinez, and then, let's see, Colburn and McFarland. If I can work that out, that is where I want to start for UFL DFS in week 9. Hopefully that helps you out. If it does, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want to play NBA Showdown, that video can be caught at the end of this video. Thanks for watching and good luck.